Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum, one of the co-founders of The Blaze, and I am so excited to be here today with my dear friend, the General, Pam Jenoff. Welcome, Pam.
Hello.
It's a little salute yet. Thank you so much. You've been practicing, I see. Among other things, we're going to talk about why I call Pam the General, a nickname that she has earned. But first, let me welcome you all to The Blaze. If you are repeat Blazers, welcome back. Thank you for bringing your light to us for all of our author interviews. If you're new to The Blaze, we are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers dedicated to putting writers online. Started in COVID, and now we're going beyond COVID, and we will keep doing it forever because we want to bring your favorite to you in your living rooms or wherever you happen to be watching this. If you like what you see, please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter. We are ubiquitous. And please consider signing up for our newsletter at www.mightyblaze.com so you will never have literary FOMO ever again. No mo FOMO. Nobody likes that. So how is everybody today? I'm seeing in the comments, like, hi from freezing Massachusetts. Yes, the wind is howling here. Pam, what is happening where you are?
Cold. It's cold. And nobody's used to it this year, right? But I heard at least here we're going to have like 2 days of this and then it's going right back up in the 50s. So
yes, it is a bit of a yo-yo, but like, so we might as well enjoy it for now and like get all our binge time in, except for Pam, who is going to be on tour like any moment now, and in fact sort of kicking it off now for her new book, Code Name Sapphire, which is how you have to pronounce this. Code Name Sapphire.
Go practice.
Okay. And for those of you who don't know Pam, I assume everybody does know, but I'm going to read your official bio. So you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Buckle up. I know, right? You may all know Pam Jenoff as, aka the General, for her many, many New York Times bestselling novels. The Woman with the Blue Star, that's the most recent one before Codename Sapphire, Lost Girls of Paris, Orphan's Tale, Commandant's Girl, The Diplomat's Wife, Ambassador's Daughter, just to name a few. Or you may know her as an author of a novella in the anthology Grand Central, which also with so many of our historical fiction friends, and which we'll talk more about in a moment. But I am not sure everybody here knows that Pam also worked at the Pentagon and the U.S. Consulate in Poland. She teaches currently at Rutgers. She teaches law and is raising 3 kids, including twins. And welcome to the hardest working woman I know, my dear, dear friend, Pam Jenoff. I'm just so happy to see you.
Thank you. How long? It's been years, right? It's since we've seen each other in person.
I think that's right. What I remember, I think it was Detroit. It was like a cold night in Detroit, or some event where we were both promoting our books, and we were.
And I've seen you in Dallas, and I've seen you in Boston, but all before COVID.
It was definitely pre-COVID, and we look so good. So we've been in like the cryogenic COVID chamber. Awesome. Yes. And so that's right. I think the last time I saw you was in Dallas with Andrea Peskin-Katz and her great readers. And we had like this amazing session. Anyway, and so it's always
We're overdue. We got to get the puppies together. It's not a metaphor. We both have dogs.
We do. We have Henry Higgins, who is almost 3, and Scoop, who's a little younger. And one of these days, and if you get a chance to see Pam in person, you should go. We're going to talk about her tour. She and I are going to just hang out together, and we'll maybe tell you when so you can stalk us, and we'll all have like a mad good in-person time.
It'd be amazing.
It will be. That's the verb. It will be amazing. Okay, so we're talk about Codename Sapphire, which love. Can you tell us in your own words what your new novel is about?
Sure. So Codename Sapphire begins, it's World War II, and we see Hannah Martel. And Hannah is a young German Jewish woman. She's a political activist, and she is trying to get out of Europe. She needs out. And so she is on a ship. She boards a ship intending to go to North America, but her ship is turned away from both the United States and Cuba. So when the ship sails back to Europe, she finds shelter in Brussels with her cousin Lily, Lily's husband, and their young son. But Hannah still needs to leave Europe. And so she connects with Micheline. Micheline is the head of the Sapphire Network. And this is an organization which is engaged in the dangerous work of helping downed Allied airmen escape Europe. And so Hannah and Micheline strike up a deal. Hannah's going to help the Sapphire line, and in exchange, Micheline will help her leave Europe for good. But Hannah's work with the line goes too far. And in a case of mistaken identity, Lily, Hannah's cousin, Lily's husband, and their young son are arrested, and they are slated for deportation to Auschwitz. And so Hannah endeavors, with the help of a few others, to stop the train that Lily is on and free her and her family from that train.
Definite goosebumps for me on that one, because I at one point interviewed like the first survivor I ever interviewed for the Steven Spielberg Survivors of the Shoah Project way back in the day, in like 1994, when I was still like literally a baby and just totally terrified. But she jumped off the train going to Treblinka and ran into the woods and survived in the woods and hid in a chimney and hid in a church. And so I know that there's so much veracity to the stories that you tell. Like The Woman with a Blue Star was about people hiding in the sewers in France. And now we have the people in Bredonk, which I had never heard of, a camp that I had not heard of, and the resistance in Belgium. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I have never read, for all of the reading that I have done about this time period, which is vast as is yours, I've never read a book set in Belgium except Anita Shreve's Resistance, which was about a tiny town in which people were rescuing downed airmen. So was that a thing? Was that the network in Belgium?
So let me say this. I love everything Anita Shreve wrote. So that goes right to my heart when you say that. I love her books, including Resistance. I remember reading that many years ago. In order to tell you how I came to Belgium, I want to tell you sort of how I get to the ideas. So I don't write about real people. I don't write real stories. For me, it's too close, and that's not mine to tell. So I find a true bit of history, and then I build a story around it. And so when I go looking for that idea, I'm always looking for what I call the gasp and the questions. And so here, the gasp was hearing about this very orchestrated attempt to stop and free people from the train. It was a planned sort of little mission when they did this. And I was like, oh. And I want that gasp because if I find an idea, like you, Jenna, we've both been doing this for a long time. And if I can find an idea that is so untold that it makes me gasp after all of these years, then I'm hopeful that readers will feel the same way. And so once I get that gasp of an idea, the next thing that comes are the questions. So you want to know, how were these people so brave to attempt it? And why hadn't more people tried to do this? And so I found this idea, and this particular real train went from Belgium. It went from Brussels to Auschwitz. So that was my starting point, how I sort of wound up in Brussels, if you will. I had never worked with Belgium, and I was fascinated because it's a very different history. The Germans didn't sort of steamroll into Brussels. They came in with this illusion of what they called the good occupiers. And so there were people like Lily who hoped in vain that if they were native Belgians, that their lives might continue. And obviously they were disabused of that notion. It was not true. But it's interesting just to stand in the shoes of a person in a particular country in a certain year of the war and imagine what that looked like. And so once you start digging in Belgium, you almost immediately come to those rescue lines, right? Because if you look where Belgium, where the Netherlands, where kind of that north of France, that's right on that track where you had these airmen coming down, in Germany or in Holland or wherever they came down, and very much so needing to get out. And so you start digging, and there's lines like the Comet Line, which was one of the biggest ones, or Dutch Paris. And these were these very sophisticated, really, networks of people who were helping the Allied airmen and others escape.
Was there anything that startled you about doing research in a new realm, like in a new country of the war, I guess is the best way I can put it?
Every country presents, I think, its own challenges, right? So I was very fortunate that I lived in Europe for almost 5 years. And so many of the places I write about, I've been, but I don't always get to go back for a book, depending on life and COVID and whatever else is going on. I don't always get to travel. And some places are more familiar to me than others. So for example, I'm good in Poland. Like that's my stomping ground, right? But when you get to Western Europe, it's a little harder for me and I have to work more to orient myself. And so It was just really interesting to look at what people perceived in the Belgian society, the difference, as in other countries, between kind of the native Belgian citizens and immigrants who were more vulnerable to what the Germans were doing initially. And that has some resonance with things we see today in our world. And there were just such fascinating aspects to the story. For example, the way that they stopped the train and the way that the prisoners who were in the concentration camp and knew the break was coming were able to help prepare for the break.
And such bravery, because they would kill you if they caught you, and then there would be reprisals. And so all the characters have a choice to make at some point as to whether they sacrifice themselves and put their loved ones in danger if they still have loved ones, or do they take the quote safe road and wait to be killed. I mean, what a terrible choice. Actually, this wasn't necessarily on my list of questions, and some of us, I know that you have a lot of fans here, like Mindy is here. Hi, Mindy. Like, you saw us in person at Grand Central when we made Pam do makeup, which was fun.
Right, but you couldn't touch me today.
I know, that's like the downside of Zoom. You're so lucky
with my schlep rock self.
No, that's when we all toured together for Grand Central, we ganged up on Pam and made her put makeup on. We were like mean girls at the slumber party. So just
and hair. There's a picture of me in those big rollers with like the saddest expression ever.
But you look really cute. Sad,
but happy to be there.
Yes, but cute. Anyway, so you have your fans here, but not everybody has heard you talk about your time in Poland, which is, I think, one of the most interesting parts of your writer journey. And can you just give us just a quick thumbnail of that to get us oriented in Pam Jenoff's Europe?
Certainly. So my journey to writing in earnest started, it's 27 years ago. I went to Krakow, Poland as a diplomat for the US State Department. And I never planned to work on the war. I went over there to stamp the visas and the passports and help the Americans who got in trouble overseas. But Poland had just come out of the half century of communism. And during that period where they had no free speech and they were cut off from the West, they had never made real progress on their Holocaust issues. And so in the mid-1990s, this became a really big thing politically. What do we do about the camps and anti-Semitism and property? And I went to Poland. I was this young girl in my early 20s. So everyone does the math and knows how old I am. But I went to Poland alone, halfway around the world, before cell phones and before the internet. And so I'm alone over there. And I'm Jewish, and I start going to Shabbat at the synagogue, and I start going to the rabbi's house for lunch. And this elderly community, week in and week out, really became like grandparents to me. I was living among the survivors, and they trusted me. And so the US government saw that I had this connection with the people, and they gave me responsibility, that portfolio for all of the Holocaust issues, kind of as my full-time job while I was there for 2+ years. And so that experience was both rewarding and difficult, and it changed me. And I've been writing about that and from that time ever since.
So your intersection with that history has been, I imagine, sometimes hard. And I would like to ask about that, but so beneficial for everybody who loves your books, because you are so wonderfully good at shining the flashlight into the hidden corners of the past. And we are all really grateful. Also, I just have to say, I hope you all agree with me. I know you all do. Like, Pam is so impressive. Every time people are like, who should we get for a speaker? I'm like, get Pam Jenoff. She is so impressive. She's so sweet, and she's so down to earth, and she is like the smartest person I know. So I just think you're amazing. Let's
very mutual. Very mutual.
I'm going to return to my fangirling in a moment. But I would love to talk a little bit more about Codename Sapphire. So one of the things I love about this book, and I think this is thematic of your last, maybe, 4 or 5 books in particular, is that the heroines are all these really strong and really different women. So can you dig a little deeper for us into Lily, Hannah, and Micheline, and what makes them all alike and what makes them all different?
Certainly. So I had started with Hannah. So it's sort of interesting. Let's talk about Hannah and Lily first. Hannah and Lily are cousins. And when they were little girls, they were very close. Their families would summer together, and they grew apart. Lily's family moved to Belgium, and they really grew apart over the years. And so when Hannah lands back in Brussels, that's the first time they've seen each other in decades. And so Hannah is this political activist, and she's lost her fiance and had other grievous losses. And so she's very committed to the cause and, very much understands what's going on in the war. Lily is in Brussels with her husband and son, and she's had the luxury for a time of sticking her head in the sand until she no longer can. So right away, Hannah is saying, but like, can't you see you can't separate when they come for other people? And sure enough, it comes around to Lily. So the first piece is the juxtaposition of these two cousins. And then you have Micheline, who is the head of Sapphire, and she's inspired by a real life woman because the Comet line was run by a woman, Andre de Jong. I say that wrong all the time. I was recording about her today for my pages, and I say that wrong, but she was the strong leader. And so Micheline was inspired by her. She's actually kind of on the young side, and she's leading this whole line, which is very true to history. But what I want to say about these women and the women in all my books is that I love to take these women in history who through normal events, they would have walked a certain path, and war throws them off that path, and they're tested and they're challenged. And I want to see what they do, both individually in their growth, but I also want to see when they meet each other, because they cross paths with women who through normal life they never would have seen. And so that's the richness to me is kind of in the way they transcend their differences.
I love that. And I was really struck by the arcs of the characters too. It's such a writer geek thing, like the character arcs. And I think about Hannah and Lily, especially, to me, seem to have really interesting arcs. And I think Lily especially grows a lot, but they kind of do a crisscross where they grow in like opposite directions. And can you talk a little bit about Lily? Because I think she is a character to whom many of us can relate, maybe, right? She says at one point, like, I'm just trying to keep my child safe. Like, how can people blame me for that? Why should I like stick my neck out? I would if I could, but I have a child. And she really develops some different behaviors. So without giving anything away, can you talk a little bit about her arc and Hannah's arc?
Yeah, and I actually would love to talk about Lily's arc if I situate it in the context of what I experienced in Poland, because I think this is really, really important. So I lived in Poland in the 1990s, and it was reasonably modern, and you'd be going about your life, and all of a sudden you would hear something like an old World War II sounding siren, because the sirens still sound the same, or you would see a crowd gathering, and I would personally have this very visceral reaction where, you sort of wanted to go run and hide. And what this made me wonder was, if I had been an ordinary Polish person, not Jewish, just a Polish citizen, what would I have done during the war? Because I am not a brave human. And I think Dorothy should have stayed in Oz because it was easier than fighting her way back. Like, I'm not the bravest of humans, so I would not have helped the Germans, but I don't know if I would have stood up or if I would have hidden in my basement for 5 years, and even more so now that I'm a mom, right? And so this really resonates with me in terms of Lily. Like, she's just trying to live her life with her husband and son, and kind of get by. And what I think we see is that when you start by thinking of protecting small, right? You're protecting the day-to-day family and the child and all of that. But really, when you start experiencing it, you kind of realize that doesn't protect you at all. And the only way to protect them is to be braver and to take that larger step. And so that's what I really feel about Lily.
She kind of got pushed into it. Years ago, when I was doing my interviewing, I never forgot this, that I interviewed a survivor who had survived Auschwitz. And she said to me, you never know what you're going to do unless your back is against the wall. And I never forgot that, because I had been playing that game in my head too. Would I have helped? Would I not have helped if I were, because I could maybe pass or not, but like, what would I have done? What would you have done? And so I think it almost is like a limbic choice in some ways, but for Lily, there's this reckoning with things she thinks are keeping her safe are actually just prolonging her danger, right? Can you tell us a little bit about Hannah's arc too, her development?
I can. So Hannah is very sort of strong, and she has had big losses, right? She has had big losses. So she's very isolated, and she wants to stay isolated. Like, she doesn't want to hang out in Brussels and bond with Lily or be friends with Micheline. She wants to do what she has to do to get out of there. And through her mission, you know, and through when she goes too far and puts her cousin in peril, she realizes how much people actually do mean to her. And she suddenly sees the value of this kind of interconnectedness, I think, in a way that she had put away when she was hurt. And so that's that kind of return to connection that makes her stronger. I do want to say, when you talk about the choices, I think this is so important. History, you and I learned history in school. It was all like battles and governments. And really, that's not history. History is made up of an infinite number of individual decisions, people making all of these choices, right? And so that's what I love to see with these women, and for the readers to ask.
I literally got goosebumps when you said that. There's a line in Those Who Save Us when I said that one of the characters says history is comprised of a million gray shades, a million of them, because it is just people making choices. Really, like, it's so true. I think I related to Hannah quite a bit because in my own like more noisy activism the past maybe 6 years, I would say to my friends who are journalists or my friends who are parents, like, I'll go out and march for you. Like, I'll go out on the front lines for you. I don't have children. Like, if something bad happens to me, then like I'll just take it on the chin for a lot of different people. But I still don't know what I would have done in this situation that you put your women in. And so it must be sort of fraught in some ways to go there in your mind. Like, when you're writing these scenarios, how do they affect you emotionally? Do you feel it in the writing, after the writing, or like not at all, and just have that Graham Greene splinter of ice in the writer heart?
Well, I feel all of it, but some moments you feel that just really stick with you. So I want to talk about a moment from a past book that was really, really a pinnacle of that, and then it related to this. So The Orphan's Tale, which was my book about a German circus that had sheltered Jewish people. In The Orphan's Tale, there is a true scene that I borrowed of a boxcar of babies, and it's the train of unknown children. And when I read about that, I knew it was the opening scene of my book. And I also knew how hard it was going to be to write. Like, usually I pants things, but I had to write that in a single sitting, because in order to do that scene justice, I had to metaphorically put my own children on that train. And that was really, really, you know, a difficult thing to do. Same in this book. And I can't give too much away, but there is a moment with Lily and her child where you're like, oh no, I couldn't possibly, right? And so you have to step in there and be like, oh yeah, that's why that happened.
Do you have sort of like an emotional sunburn at all from working on the books, or do you think it's a way of kind of working the visions of the books out of your system? I don't know if that makes any sense, but I sometimes think like I return to this period over and over in my own work just because it's like almost like a DNA thing. Like, I'm not sure that I have a choice about it. And it helps. It feels cathartic to me to get these stories out. Does it feel that way to you, or is it sometimes emotionally tough?
I mean, I think it's both, but the way I approach the books, after I get the gasp and after I have the questions, the next thing I always must ask is, can I do this respectfully? Because I approach these books with a kind of reverence. And to me, these books are love songs to the people I knew in Poland, to the people more broadly who lived through the era or did not live through the era, as the case may be. And so that's how I approach it. And it's almost, it feels like a kind of mission in that way. So that's how I think of it.
The Japanese have a word for this, and forgive me, guys, if you heard me say this before, but the people who lived through Hiroshima are now, many of them, not alive to tell the tale anymore, but the people they told their stories to are alive, and they have a moral responsibility to bring those stories out into the world so that they continue to be told. And those people are called denshosha. It means transmitter. So I think you're a transmitter.
Thank you.
Of these stories. Yes. And tell us like one surprising thing maybe about Codename Sapphire that we know it's about these three women. We know it's about Belgium and the downed airmen. Is there anything that you want readers to know that like they'd be like, oh, that's not what I was expecting from this book, maybe?
I'm not sure that I have surprising. There are always little historical nuggets, and I just did this series of 3-part facts behind the fiction, and there were sort of things that I couldn't get to because of time. So I wanted to talk more about the various camps that they had in Belgium. Breendonk, which was the bigger one, and Melchin, or I'm going to missay that. That was the transit camp. I thought that was very interesting. This ship, the St. Louis, which I did, the real ship, the St. Louis, which I did talk about on my facts behind the fiction, inspired the ship in my story, but I didn't use the real ship because my dates are different and I didn't want to mess with the dates. That's always hard with historical fiction. The other thing, I probably didn't get as much time in the book as I wanted because, we historical fiction authors, like, we have all this history and we don't always get to put it all in. The one that was, I wanted more time on this book was about what the people in the camp had done to prepare for the raid. So they actually did so much work and, preparing tools to help break out. And at one point, they sort of had to stage a plumbing accident. So they would have an excuse to go beyond the gates and get materials. And all of that I loved borrowing from, and the way they would transmit messages with the outside world. And I think that was fascinating because I really wanted to give that as much space as possible within the confines of the story.
That could be its own whole book, right? I know we talk a lot about the resilience of the human spirit. Like, it's on pretty much every jacket copy for every World War II book ever, and also all the other books that have ever been written. But it does surprise me in your portrayal of it in Codename Sapphire. So brilliant. Like, people who are in the camp are surviving, like barely surviving, like total subsistence level, if that, and still managing to find a way to push back is just incredible. So those of you who haven't yet read the book, since it's been out like a minute, like, you should buy at least 50 copies of it. So that you read about it.
I want to say that, yes, the people in the camp, absolutely. It was amazing the things they were doing. I'm also super impressed with the people on these resistance lines that were helping the airmen escape. So you've got the brave resistance leaders, and those people could move around with relative ease. But you had thousands of citizens of these countries who were helping from their homes and businesses, whether it was hiding people, producing false documents, money, food, what have you. And the really striking thing about those people, which I read, is the resistance workers could pick up on the fly if they were going to get caught and try and flee. But if you're sitting in your village with your family in your shop and you get caught, you're pretty much stuck. So in some ways, the contributions of the ordinary people were as impressive, and I don't know, maybe more so, but certainly as impressive.
That's really a heartwarming thing to say, I think, because you could give somebody an egg if you were a farmer and your whole family would be shot for giving somebody an egg. So again, like, what do you do in that moment when somebody comes out of the woods and needs your assistance? Really, really, really interesting. What parallels, that kind of reminds me a little bit of something you said earlier about the past throwing echoes to today. What parallels do you see between Codename Sapphire and our present world?
So it's interesting. When I set out to write a book, I never set out with theme. Like, I don't have that much forethought. I'm not that strategic. And so I'll write a book and then some theme will emerge. The Lost Girls of Paris came out right as we were questioning, whether we should trust our government. And that very much had that going on, for example. With this book, it really is about people transcending otherness. It really is. You see these women coming together, and I feel like if readers can read that and they can sort of empathize with people coming together, then that helps eliminate or lessen some of the division that's so present in our lives right now.
So it is. Do you feel like it's on balance a hopeful thing that you do?
I feel like it is a relevant, I don't want to overstate, important, necessary thing to tell stories in ways that illuminate the past and help people extrapolate that to our present lives. So that's kind of where I put it. I find it like a worthwhile endeavor, to do that, and relevant. And I don't listen to anyone who says we should stop.
Yeah, same. It's like a literary mitzvah, but more important. It's a litzvah.
A litzvah. There you go.
More important than a mitzvah. It's a litzvah.
That's amazing.
Do you think I just made that up? It's just
awesome.
What happens when you don't get any
learning so much.
Use it. Take it on your tour. Take it with you. Oh my gosh. And I had a question and it just went like right out of my head with the litzvah thing, where I was like patting myself on the back about that. But I do want to ask about writer life stuff, which is, you talk about like, you don't start out with theme and you like start out with research, and get the gasp, which I think should be a hashtag and a t-shirt for writers. Like,
gasp. I'm going to go with that.
Get the gasp. So you get the gasp first. then can you walk us through what your process is like? Because you write fast, and I will now like lead into why I call Pam the general. But like first, tell us a little bit about your sort of typical process.
Sure. And I'm going to disclaim the writing fast in a second for reasons you will see. But so I have an idea and I am a pantser, right? So the plotters write neatly with outlines and the pantsers just go blah. And someone once called it throwing up on the screen. And that's kind of what I do. So I go blah for months and months and months until it makes sense. And then you start putting it in order. It all comes out at once. However, when I wrote The Woman with the Blue Star, I wrote a total stinker of a first draft that I had to rewrite 95% of that book in 5 months. And I never want to do that again. So I am a reformed pantser in that I do a rough outline and show it to my editor before I start. Hi, Andrea. I do that before I start so that I don't go the wrong way. But mostly I'm a pantser. I couldn't even tell you how long it takes me to write a book anymore. I used to be book a year, but I've gotten older, books are harder, and I've slowed down and I like it better writing slower. But here's why I don't write that fast anymore. I have no stamina. Like I can't do a lot of writing in a session or even a day. So here's the deal I made with myself, Jenna, and you'll appreciate this is true, Pam. I said, if I can't write a lot, I must write more often. Right.
Okay.
If I can't expand this way, I'm going to have to expand this way. And so I do write 7 days a week by and large, for some snippet of time, some little snippet of time I've missed a few. This is a hard week. I've missed a few days this week, but by and large, I write every single day, short chunks, and as much of in the morning as I can possibly get.
I love you so much because when I am like, oh, I can't write for like long periods of time anymore either. So I go shopping. Like that is what I do. And you're like, no, I mean, like I'm online, like shopping and like messing around on social media. And you're like, I just write more and more often. So this is the reason, you guys, that I call Pam the general, because she writes every day. And she says she has no stamina. She has all the stamina. So when we were on tour for Grand Central, which was like this anthology, I'll just background it really quickly. Some of you know this. It was how many of us? 10 of us who write World War II fiction, all best-selling female authors, all contributed a novella to this amazing anthology. And each novella was set in Grand Central Station when America was coming home from the war on the same day in 1945. And we did this tour where a lot of us got together in person at Grand Central Station to launch the book. And that was when we forced Pam into curlers and makeup. And like the rest of us were like, let us get our victory rolls on. And we had like ModCloth dresses and crazy. Right. Pam was like, fine. But at that time, like what I remember about this is I'm like, I'm on tour. I can't write anything for at least 5 years because I'm on tour and I need to bring my energy to my audience, my people. Meanwhile, Pam is like getting up at 5 a.m. while I'm like ordering room service, running up and down the stairs in the hotel to stay in shape and writing. And I'm like, you're writing while you're on tour? And she writes every single day. So I called her the general.
Well, I have to give the shout out on the exercise up and down the stairs to our friend Karen White. So the hotel for Grand Central did not have a gym. So she decided we were going to exercise on the back staircase. So that did cut into the writing time a little bit, but that was the best time because that's when we all really became friends. I mean, that was the magic moment.
We did. We have enduring, lasting friendships. And Pam and the women who contributed to that anthology are like my sorority sisters, except not mean. Like there's no competition. It could have been like a slumber party that went dreadfully wrong, and it just and like turned into a Lifetime movie, and it didn't because we all super love each other. So I'm really glad. But I still to this day have like writer envy of Pam's stick-to-itiveness. So when you say you have no stamina, I beg to disagree with you because you are putting out books really, really quickly. I admire this. I envy it. Your audience is really, really grateful. What does your editor think about this? Your editor, Erica, who I love and know and worked with for a book. Like, are you guys like BFFs now forever?
Oh yeah. So the story with Erica is that we actually wanted to work together before she came to our current publisher. We had wanted to work together in another house and it didn't work out. So when she came here, it was kismet. And so she and my agent Susan, they're definitely my dream team, and they're the people that make everything come true, along with a much bigger group of people. But those two are, the first and last on my work. And I was very fortunate. In January, I got to go up to New York. I'm near Philadelphia, but I got to go up to New York and see them for the first time in 4 years. And it was amazing. And I could not be more grateful to them. They're amazing.
I know I keep needing to write a book so I can go see my agent and my editor. Like really, like I miss them, but I have no reason to just show up and like get a mani-pedi, you know? So I guess I'll do some work at some point. Okay, so I'm going to ask a sort of like, actually, I have two questions. The first is, which book was it when you were up at 5 every morning writing a chapter and sending it to Erica, and then she would bounce it back to you that same morning? And so you were writing like a chapter a day, because that was so cray.
Oh my goodness. So Grand Central, I know exactly when Grand Central was. It was 9 years ago because it was my twins' fourth birthday, right? So I know exactly. It had to be 2014. I can't remember what book I was working on. And to be fair, I don't know if I was bouncing chapters, but I am like an early morning person, and I don't send people emails on the weekends anymore, every forum, because I'm trying to respect people's personal space. But I key up the emails in my draft file on the weekend, and then Monday morning at like 4 or 5 in the morning, I'm like, pew, 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 like firing out those emails. So Erica is also, I think, somewhat of an early riser. So I know when I send that first volley, I'm looking for a response way too early in the morning. It gets worse with middle schoolers because they get up early, so it doesn't always work.
I so love that. See, I told you she was a general. Like you were deploying your emails, like you're deploying email troops, like got them all. It's like Monday D-Day, like to get all the
taking nothing away from the real military for whom I have the utmost of respect. I worked at the Pentagon, like for the Secretary of the Army, and I have utmost respect. So my kind of being a general is pretty superficial, but I embrace that title Jenna gave me wholeheartedly ever since she gave it to me. I'm so honored by it.
Thank you. And we should clarify that I am the disrespectful one and not Pam, but everybody.
You are not disrespectful either. I just feel like I want to say, like, I am not a general, like not a real, I only play a general on Zoom, right?
Yeah. And it's like, it's my highest accolade anyway. I'm so in awe of how organized you are. And like, you just get your ish done. So, which I think is astonishing.
Love it.
How did having multiple New York Times bestsellers change your writing process, if any way?
I don't know if it changed my process. So here's the honest story. I was not an overnight bestseller. It was exactly 10 years to the day. March 1st, 2007, Commandant's Girl came out. March 1st, 2017 was when I had a book hit the New York Times for the first time. So it was literally 10 years to the day. And my great story about that day was I was at karate with my children, and I used to do the karate. I mean, because I did karate for like 20 years. So I was half in a karate uniform when I saw that I had missed a call from New York. And I was like, it's a Wednesday night. I'm going to call back. And they were telling me the good news. And so then they were like, well, what are you going to do to celebrate? I said, we'll put an extra topping on the pizza. Like, what am I going to do to celebrate? And so that's how my life has always run. One day you hear the good news, and the next morning I'm driving to Rutgers to teach, eating my peanut butter sandwich in the car. So definitely doesn't change life, nor would I want it to. My process, I mean, I think just, I'm very lucky that I have great people to listen and support my work and to bounce things off of, and that are waiting to read it and waiting to make it better and do things with it. But that has been the case since before that book hit the list. It's always kind of been that way, that how it is. You're so grateful in publishing when you get to surround yourself with good people. And I'm lucky that some of the people I work with right now are the same people I started with my first book in 2005. And so that is a wonderful experience too.
It is, honestly, like my relationship with my agent has like now outlasted my marriage by like 2 times. It's just like I've known her for 22 years, I want to say. So, and that is a great gift. So speaking of things with longevity, we were talking about the litzvah of writing historical fiction, particularly about the Holocaust era, and kind of shining your flashlight into those corners. Do you ever think about stepping off that track, so to speak, and doing something different? And what would it be if you did?
So I have stepped off. I had 2 modern books very early in my career after Commandant's Girl. I wrote 2 modern books, and I've written modern historical hybrid. And so I've done it. But right now with World War II, there's just so much to tell and so many stories. And as long as I keep finding gasps that I can write with respect, I think this is very much my happy space. That's not to say I wouldn't want to explore different topics or different structures. But when people say, oh, I'm so tired of World War II, I say, wait a minute. World War II is such a big thing, whether it's domestic or overseas or different countries, different points of view. It's just so very rich, and it's such fertile ground for storytelling, right? Like to take your reader and put her or him or them in the shoes of my protagonist and have that person say, what would I have done? The war has the dire circumstances and the stark choices. And so the storytelling potential, as well as the historical discovery, is amazing for World War II. That is not to say that I don't have a drawer full of ideas that could never be set in history that I'd love to write. It's not to say that I might have not threatened to write a big saucy romance under a pseudonym. But right now my time is very much spent here.
You may or may not have done that, right? I just wrote
not yet. I keep promising with all of my free time, I will do it.
You could be Jam Penoff and I could be Jenna Blum, and we can write a historical romance. I just did a historical romance podcast and I loved it. And then
how have we not talked about your podcast? I'm just in awe of what you're doing. It's amazing. I listen. You just have, it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It was Jane Green's idea. So we can just say hats off to Jane, who like spins off many ideas. But like, I really loved switching genres because it was kind of like the pressure is off when you're doing something new and it doesn't matter. And I told my agent I wanted to sell it as a novel. And she's like, no, I actually don't think you do though, because you don't actually want to be historical romance. You want to be historical fiction. I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll sell out. Don't know. So speaking of selling out or not selling out, what are you working on? And I just saw Lynn ask the same question, like, what are you working on?
So it's funny. I am normally such an open book on what I'm working on, but it's such early days that I don't have like that pithy one-liner about it yet. I will say that I'm working on a book that has a story set during World War II, a story set after the war, and kind of a mysterious object that connects the two stories. So,
oh my God, I need to know what the object is.
I'll tell you later.
Okay. I think we should just, everybody put in the chat, like what you think the object is. Pam doesn't have to know, but like maybe if you see something that is like 6 degrees of separation, unless you think it will let the air out of the tires.
No, go for it.
All right. Hazard your guesses. Put them in the chat. Meanwhile, I totally forgot that I'm supposed to let our audience ask questions. So do we have questions in addition to Lynn's questions?
Because we just talk to each other the whole time.
I know, seriously. I'm like, we have like so much to talk about. And I could talk about writer stuff with you. I mean, we did like a 65-minute Uber ride at one point where we were just talking about like.
You taught me how to Uber. Do you remember that? I thought it was Lyft, but I'm like, I do not Uber. I don't know how to do this. And you were like, come on, I'll show you how to do it.
I'm so pushy. I'm like, put makeup on, get in the Uber. I'm like your stage mother. I'm like your mean
what would Jenna do? I'll do it.
So sweet. All right. How do you name your characters? Hi, Anissa. We love you.
Hi. And yes, Anissa, and I've seen your comments so many places and your wonderful support on Instagram I've seen. And thank you so much. I've been in a total tunnel this week, so I haven't responded to things, but thank you. So naming characters, I mean, I always start with an idea of what a character's name is, kind of like based on that pantsing approach of who you're writing about. But it can change because even if you have an idea for a character, let's start with the fact that if you're writing 2 or 3 women, you don't want their names to sound that much alike. So one of the biggest problems I have is most women's names, I'm going to overgeneralize, in Europe end in the letter A. There's lots of Evas and Annas and Allas and Ellas, and a lot of the countries, the feminine names tend toward names that end in A. So it can be really hard to find 3 different names that don't sound the same. Then you have to make sure it's appropriate to the country, right? And appropriate to the era. So there are databases of names, like babies born in 1920 and the most popular names. And you can go look for names there if you have to stretch to find other ideas. Then when you've written 12 books, you have to make sure you haven't used that name before in a way that's going to confuse people, right? So that's a whole thing. And yeah, at one time, a publisher in another country wanted to change my protagonist's name, and they said, we're going to call her Linda Voss. And I'm going, Linda Voss. Linda
Voss. From Shining Through.
Shining Through, right. Which I love. And they were trying to use that name. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. It's funny because I was thinking, does anybody really remember what the characters' names are from book to book? Like maybe I could sort of recite a name that sounds like another character's name if I think that's what the character. I literally was thinking about this morning because I'm trying to name a character. But as soon as you said Linda Voss, I was like, Shining Through. So
right. Yeah. You knew. And what are you working on naming a character, Miss?
I can't talk about it yet.
Okay.
I mean, it literally. I will tell you, Sika. I'm sorry, everybody. This is so rude, but I will like maybe whisper it to Pam. But I am the person who, like, when I'm working on something, I have to hold it like really, really close, like a little flame,
Right.
because I am not somebody who writes every day. And I put out a book every like 10 years, but I
It's
got
worth the wait. It's worth the wait for your books.
you.
But I want to say two things about talking about ideas. First of all, have you seen Encanto? You know that "We Don't Talk About Bruno" thing? That's the song from Encanto. You know, it's a kid thing. But anyway, there's a song called "We Don't Talk About Bruno." So that's what I think of when people don't want to talk about their
That
ideas.
looks
But
so
you know,
funny.
sometimes with good word too, we worry about like what other people are working on. So one time I was on a Zoom just like this, and I was with, I think Erica Roebuck was on, our friend Erica from Grand Central, and she said something vague about working on something, and I panicked because I was worried about what we were working on and whether it was too close to one another. I picked up the phone and I called her, and she was like, "Well, not me, but check with Christina." And then I called her other friend Christina. I'm like, "You're not working on this, are you?" And it was funny because we're all kind of working in our own silos, but it just, I was like, I don't want to write what they're writing.
Yeah, totally. And I have that sinking feeling every once in a while when I am working on a book and it takes me like 3 to 5 years to usually alchemize a manuscript into a book, whatever. And then I see somebody else has come out with a similar book or has a similar topic. And then I have to call my agent and be like, can we put out a hit on this person? Because book, like when Woodrow came out, there was a woman who had just written a book about a dog and had a John Irving blurb. And I was like, I'm done. I'm going to go work as a waitress. Of course, the books are nothing alike, but, it's all it's great. Okay, we can take a couple more questions. What else is going on in question land over there? What are you reading, Pam?
Ooh, what am I reading? That is a really good question. So I read in, let me say this, I read in fits and starts, right? So I will be like, nothing for a few months, like nothing is doing it for, and then all of a sudden there'll be a huge burst of books. And so, and also I'm also a library person, and I completely support libraries. Right after independent bookstores, like libraries are next on my list. So I also will like queue them up, and I don't get a lot of time to read, but I read in the pickup line for my kids. So last month was a little bit of a thriller month. So I had Mary Kubika's Just the Nicest Couple, and Kim Bell's The Personal Assistant, and I read The House in the Pines by Anna Reyes, and I read The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. So I was on like a thriller bender. And then I'm excited about I'm reading some early copies. Like I just got Patty Callahan Henry's. I have her Secret Book of Flora Lee. I hope I'm not saying that wrong. And Lynn Cullen's got The Woman with the Cure coming out, and so on. And I can't mention books without leaving so many people out. So I don't know. Today is Friday, and I'm not sure what I'm reading yet. Is that weird? I'm not quite sure what I'm reading today. But I read all of it. So yes.
What day do you go to the library? Every day?
So it's hilarious because I actually utilize 5 different library systems. That's not a joke. There's like local, county, the university. I literally have all of the library called to check on me during COVID. I'm not even kidding. They actually called to check on me. And so there are times like a Monday morning when I want to pick up holds where I might be at 2 or 3 different libraries before, on that day, or I might not get there for a while. So it varies, I have to get over to the library, and then there's one year where I work, and I have a deep love of the libraries.
Yeah, I think this is so great that you support the libraries. And also, if you guys don't know, and I see Mindy's question about what I'm reading, which I will answer, I promise. And thank you, Mindy. But if you don't already follow Pam on Instagram and on Facebook and on Twitter, like you should, because she supports other authors so heartily. And so you can get a lot of great book recommendations from the people who she's boosting. And also there's a lot of library commentary and Scoop commentary, her dog, and also Philadelphia Eagles. So that might or might not.
Especially these 2 weeks. And I do want to hear what Jenna's reading, but I want to say nobody supports books more than you, Jenna, and authors with Blaze and what you've done. But part of the reason that the amazing thing is we had set up this kind of infrastructure of authors and influencers and librarians and booksellers before COVID, right? So when we all had to go home, it was like, the scaffolding went up, and what Blaze has done is just incredible. So what are you reading?
Well, I'm just lucky because I work with fantastic people who make it all go. Yes. Otherwise, I just like kind of sit here in my underwear and watch and eat popcorn. What am I reading? I kind of want to like run across the room and get what I'm reading, but one of them is, I'm like looking at it right now. I'm like, I can get it. Okay, just do a little dance for a second. Okay. Are you dancing?
Am I supposed to be dancing?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be dancing. Okay. Hi, I'm back. So I need to start keeping like a whole bunch of my books that I'm currently reading for this. Hank Flippy Ryan, who is our
I want that.
reviewer and wins all the Emmys. The House Guest is coming out February 7th. So this
I
is
want that book.
I love. And I posted a joke thing about like, isn't it great that she used me for her cover? And then people actually like believed it. I'm like, that's not actually me on the cover, but I'm going to interview Hank later in March. I'm also like, this is a guy who was in my first writing class ever that I taught for Grub Street. His name is Christopher Gorham. His book also comes out February 7th here in Boston. He'll be at the Harvard Bookstore. And this is about a really undersung woman who was like the top advisor to FDR. She's like the most important historical figure that nobody has ever heard of. So it's The Confidant by Chris Gorham, and stuff coming out, Society of Shame by Jane Roper, which is coming out April 4th. She is a Blazer, and this is about a political spouse who gets unwillingly thrust into the cancel culture iconic spotlight, and it's hilarious. It's like Carl Hyacin, but written by a woman. And Daughters of Nantucket, which everybody has heard about by now because it is everywhere. This is like the Real Housewives of Nantucket during the Great Fire of 1846, and one
Amazing.
Ryan Mitchell. There's a Black abolitionist, and then there's just like our every woman housewife, and they all converge in unexpected ways. So it's like, this is just so good. It's so good.
Really good. I read it. It's really good.
Here's what I was reading before I got on this interview. I'm not kidding. Like, I literally have been like reading this. This is what I'm reading. So that's what happens when you ask me what I'm reading. Like, I'm reading about 8 jillion books, and I'm listening to Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout.
And you must get all the books, but I have to admit, is it wrong to say I stalk books? So there are like a lot of books I get early, but there are books coming down the line where I'm like, I want that. Does anyone have a galley? Like, I'm kind of looking forward, desperately waiting. I'm waiting for Jill Santopolo's new book because I love all of her books. Stars Under an Italian Sky. I really want to read that one. Victoria Benton Frank has a book coming out, and in the spring, and I really want to read that. And I really want Drowning by TJ Newman, but that's not out till May 30th. So
nice.
Yeah,
I'm going to a niece's book. Oh yeah, so good. Yeah, no, I totally do that. And we get all on Blaze. One of the great privileges of Blaze, out of many, many, is that we get all of the publishers sending us their catalogs. Like, we want that, we want that, we want that. I haven't bought a book in 2.5 years, except for some super arcane books for research. But otherwise, I'm just like, oh, bring all the books to mama. And so you have like this great, flood of books. My mailman is just like, I really dislike you. Like. Okay, so I think we have time for maybe one more question, which I know is going to be tough because we had a lot of excellent questions in the chat. Oh, Anissa, when you're doing your research, how do you know you're done and ready to write? Great question.
So what's interesting about that? I don't do the research ahead of time, which might be unusual. I don't know if you do, but so I used to be on tour with our good friend Allison Richmond, who's an amazing historical fiction author. And Allie would say that she wrote we were on tour so many times together that we could have switched places and given each other's remarks. And so we spoke about that. But she used to say that she researched for months ahead of time until the research was sewn into her skin. And is that what you do as well?
Yep.
So I'm what I would call a contemporaneous researcher. So I only need so much research to get started. And then I can research on a need to know basis as I'm writing, which is actually for me kind of efficient because a research brain and writing brain are different parts of the day. So if I'm tired of writing after the morning, I can do research. I love research. I love historical research. I do legal research, but historical research, I love what you were saying about the arcane books, when you have to go and find that one out of print book, and does the library have it? Or are you going to have to find a very expensive old dusty copy somewhere? It's very fun.
I do love that a lot. Okay, so last question is, how and where can people get signed copies of Code Name Sapphire? And also, can you roll information about your tour and where people can find you IRL into this question?
Absolutely. So my tour kicks off tomorrow. I'm headed to North Carolina. I'm headed to Boston, and I'm going to miss Jenna there. I'm crying about that for real. I'm going back then a bunch of things in the New Jersey, Philadelphia kind of area. I'll be all over the place here. And then I'm headed to Florida. I'm headed to South Carolina. That might be it for now. More to come. Oh, and Central PA and on and on. But if you're not, you can find my tour on Facebook or my website or anywhere online. if we're not going to be able to see each other in this initial run of events, I want to tell you that my local independent bookstore, Inkwood Books in Haddonfield, New Jersey, they will get you signed personalized copies. So you call them and you say, I want the book like to Mary from Pam. I'll go into the store and sign. During the pandemic, I was signing from my car. They would bring the books out to me with a mask, and I was signing, and they will mail the book to you. So they are amazing. So if you want the true personalized copy without actually seeing me, Inkwood Books in Haddonfield.
Everybody wants to see you, but
I
yeah,
want to see you.
yes, I want to see you. So I know our awesome producer is putting links to that in the chat, to Inkwood Books, and also to your website, Pam. And is there anything that you would like to say to your readers before the dismount?
I really just want to say thank you. And I want to say that I really would like to continue the conversation, because there are readers, and some of them are on here. I'm looking at you, Mindy, and other friends who we've had relationships for years and years that have grown, and we, in person and virtually. So please, I invite everyone to find me individually online, wherever you're hanging out, and we can continue the conversation.
Good. You heard that, people. You now have permission to stalk the general, which I'm going to find you in person online, so I can come and see you, make you do other things like makeup, Uber, like just wait to see what I have up my sleeve. Next,
life skills.
More life skills. Yeah, now it'll all be about like book talk or some horrific thing. But Pam, thank you so much for making us part of your for Codename Sapphire. You guys buy a jillion copies of this, because then you'll be able to say that you had a big hand in creating Pam's next huge bestseller for good reason, and have a wonderful time on your tour. To everybody, happy reading and stay well.
Mwah.
Thank you.